Welcome to the Ethel M Wood Lecture. My name is Paul Joyce. I'm the head of the Department of Theology and Religious Studies here at King's College London. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this Ethel M Wood Lecture. The Ethel M Wood Lecture is a University of London event, an annual lecture endowed by Mrs. Ethel M Wood in 1947. And it's administered jointly by the Department of Theology at Heythrop College and the Department of Theology and Religious Studies here at King's. Now, since the foundation of the lecture in 1947, many distinguished speakers have lectured on topics within the broad field of biblical studies. They include C.H. Dodd, H.H. Rowley, and C.S. Lewis. But I can say with confidence that there has not been a more distinguished lecturer than tonight's lecturer, Professor David Clines. David Clines is indeed one of the most creative and influential biblical scholars in the world. He was originally from Sydney, Australia, but David has spent his career in the University of Sheffield, including as professor and head of the Department of Biblical Studies, a very distinctive thing. It's a measure of his distinction that he was president of the US-based Society of Biblical Literature in 2009, the first person from outside North America to hold that honor. His specialism has always been the Hebrew Bible, and his distinctive contribution has been the introduction of new methods of biblical criticism. For example, rhetorical criticism, reader-response criticism, deconstruction, feminist criticism, and ideological criticism. At the same time, though, he's made very significant contributions to traditional forms of study. For example, his massive 3-volume commentary on the book of Job and his editorship of the Dictionary of Classical Hebrew. Another very distinctive contribution is that David has been engaged since 1976 in academic publishing, in the conviction that academic authors should have the control of the means of publication of their own work. And in 1976, David, together with 2 colleagues at Sheffield, David Gunn and Philip Davies, established the Journal for the Study of the Old Testament. And that led on to the founding of Sheffield Academic Press, which by 2000 was publishing more academic books in biblical studies than any other publisher in the world. But even more significant than that is that the work of David Clines and his Sheffield colleagues became a crucial catalyst in what can only be described as a revolution that has transformed much of biblical studies internationally over the last 40 years. So it's great to have you here. There will be refreshments afterwards on the terrace. Please join us, and there will be signs to lead us in that direction. But for now, I have the great pleasure and honour of introducing this year's Ethel M Wood Lecturer, Professor David Clines, and I invite him to deliver his lecture on the scandal of a male Bible. David.
I don't usually get an introduction like that, and I'm still quaking, but thank you, Paul, for that. It's a great honour and to be giving the Ethel M Wood Lecture, which I've known about for a long time and always thought they must be very grand people who get to give that. So here am I, not quite meeting the standard, I fear, but I hope this will be entertaining. The Bible is a male book, written by men for men. It enshrines male values, promotes and inculcates them. Everywhere it esteems men above women. It portrays a deity, moreover, infused with male values. What is the scandal of this male Bible? Twofold. It is first that the Bible is deeply compromised by its adherence everywhere to specifically male values, and secondly, that its masculinity is hardly ever noticed or mentioned, not even in our much more egalitarian world. That is the total scope of this lecture. I am not here to propose a program of action. Consciousness raising is my only objective, and I aim above all to put you in possession of the facts, at least as I see them. To begin with, the Bible was written by men. Every named author of a biblical book is male, and there's no actual evidence that any book or part of a book even was written by a woman. Ruth, Song of Songs, Hebrews have been proposed, but there's very little evidence that we could adduce in favour of those proposals. And if a woman wrote any part of the Bible, given the culture she came from, her work would inevitably have been affected quite deeply by male interests. And the Bible was written for men. Women did not read, on the whole, in the world of the Bible. It is men that are addressed in the Bible, as in the Ten Commandments, where its readers or hearers are enjoined not to desire their neighbour's wife, for example. But no women are encouraged or warned against desiring their neighbour's husband. When Paul writes to his churches, he addresses his brothers, not his brothers and sisters. The letters of the New Testament were written for men, and who do you think the Gospels were written for? Compare these two pictures of crowds demonstrating. Which society do you think ancient Israel, the world of the Bible, most resembles? Hong Kong or Iraq? Males and females together in the street, or just males? Being a man. No one is born a man. Male children are turned into men by learning how to be a man, how to behave as a man, how to perform the role as a man. Because masculinity is not a natural or inevitable thing, but a socially constructed way of being, created especially through the language and practices that surround males from their earliest days. Masculinity is a script written for men by their societies, a script that men in their various cultures act out their whole lives long. The Bible is riddled with male values. I mean that certain key values of the Bible are mostly male and specifically male. And those that I'll review in this lecture are in all 8 in number. And here they are: strength, violence and killing, size, honour, holiness, womanlessness, totality thinking, and binary thinking. You've heard of all of those, probably, except totality thinking, which I think I kind of made up. These are some primary concepts in that largely identified biblical language that I would call masklish, or if I was talking Hebrew, gavrit. Superficially, Hebrew and Greek are the languages of the Bible, but its real language, its essential language, is masklish. And first, strength. The core masculine characteristic in the Bible is strength. No woman in the Bible is called strong. Physical strength is one of the things that differentiates men from women. Women are about 50% as strong as men, in the upper body that is, though 66% in the lower body. But men are stronger than women. Strength is not only what men have, it is also what men aspire to. They strive to become strong and to show themselves strong. And so they believe strength is good, weakness is bad, and so do women. Not because they are strong, but because they live in a male world. And in the world of the Bible, it was as it is now. This is a cultural message, this message about strength that has remained essentially unaltered over millennia. Most boys of today have internalized this rule by the time they are 2 years old, and most adult men are bound by this rule. The boys will have so often been praised for their signs of strength, while their sisters have been praised for their prettiness, for goodness sake, that they grow up believing that strength is both their rightful possession and their lifelong ambition. So when you find an intense concentration of the language of strength in a text, you may properly form the suspicion that you are in the realm of the masculine. Here is a prophetic text that revolves about the language of strength. Yahweh God comes as a mighty man. His arm, that is power, rules for him. He brings out the army of heaven by the greatness of his might, because he is strong in power. He gives power to the faint. To those without might he increases strength. Those who wait for Yahweh shall renew their strength. This text assumes that you will agree that weakness is bad and strength a most desirable quality. And it assures you that if you do not have enough strength of your own, you can acquire it from God's surplus strength. For Paul, too, to be a man is to be strong. Says he, watch you, stand fast in the faith, quit you like men, that is, acquit yourselves like men, be strong. And the Greek words andrizo and kratawai are equivalent to one another. For Paul, to be a man is to be strong. Strength is definitional for males. Paul evidently sees himself as the ultimate can-do male. To use his own language, he has the strength for everything through him who empowers me. It's not much of a consequence whether he thinks he's innately strong or is empowered from without. Anyone who says, I'm strong enough for everything, fancies himself as Superman, even if his physical appearance is as unimpressive as Clark Kent's. Paul's physical presence is weak, he admits in 2 Corinthians. Even when Paul is making great play with the concept of weakness, saying, whenever I am weak, then am I strong, he really is more interested in power, which he likes, than in weakness, which he doesn't like. May I ask you a question, Paul? If you are strong when you are weak, does that also mean that when you are strong, you are really weak? Oh no, it's not weakness that is the state that is desirable. Whether weakness is only apparent, or weakness is a path to strength, or weakness really is strength, what matters is strength. This masculine characteristic of strength is chief among the qualities of the deity, whom we might call the Most High Male. It is of the utmost importance to the psalmist that Yahweh is strong, and he is strong above all other qualities. He has strength. He's strong and mighty. He's a mighty God, a strong rock, a strong tower, a strong refuge. He's clothed with strength. He's like a mighty man shouting in his drunkenness. He has a strong arm, a strong right hand, a mighty voice, mighty power, and he does mighty acts. Who is a strong Yahweh like you? Pretty well sums it up. Violence and killing. For a man, being strong is not an end in itself. The chief purpose of being strong, and especially of being stronger than other men, is to be able to overcome them and, if need be, kill them. The name for strength in action, in traditional male terms, is therefore violence, and the name for the violent action of men in groups is war, which means killing lots of other men, not protecting your country. Let us consider some male role models from the Hebrew Bible. First, Moses. Moses is in the basket on the Nile just because he is a male child. The Egyptian Pharaoh knows that male children grow up to be violent men. Pharaoh is right. It only takes Moses 2 sentences to get from suckling at the breast to murdering an Egyptian, Exodus 2. This is not the only killing scene Moses is involved in. When Moses, who does not believe in freedom of worship, we should notice, discovers the Israelites have been making a golden calf, While he's been up Mount Sinai receiving the Ten Commandments, he says to the Levites, "Buckle on your sword, each of you, and go up and down the camp from gate to gate, every man of you slaughtering brother, friend, and neighbour." If killing is the quintessential expression of male strength in the Hebrew Bible, killing lots of other men in company with fellow killers has to be doubly so. And killing brothers, friends, and neighbours is a triple masculinity. The narrative invokes the image of the troop, the collectivity of male warriors that moves in unison and overwhelms the fear and fatigue and conscience of the individual soldier. Violence is not necessarily physical, says Jesus. No one can be his disciple without adopting this same vision of masculinity. No one can be my disciple if he doesn't hate his father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters and his own life. Sounds suspiciously like a suicide bomber, doesn't it? Violence in language easily becomes violence in action, as in the case with Jesus with the money changers in the temple. What the disciples remember when they witness this event is the sentence from the prophets, "Zeal for your house will consume me," which is a sentence worth pondering on. It makes Jesus not responsible for his actions and represents him as out of control, consumed, eaten up by a force other than himself, zeal, which we would call obsession. All biblical scholars, mind you, improve entirely of Jesus' violence and never see a trace of rampant testosterone-fueled masculinity here. Take the case of David, a violent male. I have logged 15 separate murders he committed or authorized, and his body count in war, according to the books of Samuel, runs to some 140,000, which is rather more than the number killed, civilians and military together, in Iraq in 13 years of war. Quite an achievement with bows and arrows and sling stones, of course. Or take a sentence from the book of piety, the Psalms. "Blessed be the Lord my strength, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight." The speaker is a male, obviously, but the readers of the psalm, its end users, have been both male and female. And all our textbooks and commentaries represent the book of Psalms in general as an expression of an ungendered Hebrew piety. No one ever says, "This is a male text, this book of Psalms, and men and women alike should be on their guard in case they learn from it and internalize attitudes and prejudices that are specifically male and therefore partial and discriminatory, if not positively horrible." Let us next take divine violence, for the divine male is above all the fighter and the killer. Yahweh, God of fighting men, Yahweh Sabaoth, is his favourite title according to the prophets. Let's not linger over familiar texts on the genocide of the Canaanites, called extermination in biblical scholarship, as if they were a pest like woodworm. Let's consider the ubiquity of the language of violence. Open a prophetic book at random and you'll find some such sentences as these. "May the sword smite his arm and his right eye. Let his arm be wholly withered, his right eye utterly blinded. Behold, I am against you, says Yahweh, Lord of fighting men, and I will burn your chariots, and the sword shall devour your young." Or of Babylon, "You are my hammer and weapon of war. With you I break. With you I break in pieces. With you I break in pieces. With you I break in pieces. Man and woman, old man and youth, shepherd and flock, farmer and his team." Not the most inventive of prophetic poems, but chilling, isn't it, in its relentlessness, the way it threatens never to come to an end. Size. Associated with strength is size. The key word here is great. Actually, the word great in our English versions of the Bible is just a formal word for big, which is all that the Hebrew gadol and the Greek megas mean. We are here in the presence of the familiar male belief that size matters. Every time we read in the Bible of greatness, we are in the realm of the male. Moses was a great man. David grew greater and greater, and so on. Only once in the Hebrew Bible, never in the New Testament, is a woman called great. The one case in the Hebrew Bible is of the woman of Shunem whom Elisha visited, but the word great there probably means wealthy, as it does in reference to some men in other places. God, of course, is always called great. Everywhere called great. Great is Yahweh. Yahweh is great in Zion. There's none like you, O Yahweh. You're great. Your name is great in might. Read these verses again with big instead of great. Why not? Yahweh is big. Big is Yahweh. There's none like you, Yahweh. You are so big. But it doesn't sound so impressive, does it? God is big, his voice is big, his deeds are big. If the Bible writers spoke Arabic rather than Hebrew, they would be saying Allahu Akbar. God is the greatest. God is the most big. Whenever you see the verb magnify, it means regard as big, big up. It doesn't mean actually make bigger, as like blowing up a balloon, because it's only those who are already big that are magnified in the Bible. And all the big people in the Bible are male. So you can only magnify people already big who, of course, are male. Another form that bigness takes is height. The difference between men and women in height is not as marked as the difference in strength. The average male has historically been only 8% taller than the average woman. But it's a visible marker of difference all the same. Jesus allegedly asks, which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit to his stature? And I ask, which gender of person is most likely to want to add a cubit to their height? Is it women who have trouble with being short? Or is it men who would feel more of a man if they were taller? I'll leave you that. As for the deity, Yahweh is often called the Most High, Elyon, the tallest of the tall, the God of height, in fact. He is exalted, or to be regarded as exalted. Be exalted, O Yahweh, in your strength. I am exalted among the nations. Thus says the high and lofty one, I dwell in the high and holy place. When the Ark of the Covenant on which he's riding processes into Jerusalem, he is too tall for it to get through the gates of the city. So the gates need to be demolished and rebuilt. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. He's too big to fit in through the city gate. Honor. Here is another characteristically male concept. What is honor? It's a recognition by the group of the status of a male. It is a competitive matter, for a man's honor ranking is relative to that of all other males in his group. It's constantly open to challenge, and a man with honor always has to be prepared to defend it. It's like the honor you get from competitive sport. You're only as good as your last game. A man's honor is his name, shame, or reputation. And honor can be countered or reduced by shame, which is not the feeling of being ashamed, but the act of being put to shame, to being put down, belittled, or dishonored. What is wrong with honor in Israelite society is not that it existed, but that it was confined to males. In the Hebrew Bible, while women can be shamed, they cannot be honoured. This world of honour used to be the world of Job, for example, where deference and respect for the man of honour and standing was the norm. He portrays himself in his judicial role. When he arrived in the town square, everyone, all the other males that is, fell silent and gave him the honour that they all believed he was due. The voice of the nobles would be hushed and their tongue would cleave to their palate. This is not a democracy. This is not even the House of Commons. Now, after his affliction by God, Job has been dishonoured. He has stripped my honour from me. And that is Job's grief. People often think that this book of Job is about suffering and that being a problem, and that Job's real grief is that he is physically suffering. Not a word of it. It's dishonour that's troubling him, because that has reduced his rank in society from top of the pole to somewhere near the bottom. Without honour, a male is shamed. Defeat in a battle is automatically shame for soldiers and for a city's inhabitants and for its gods. If a farmer can't produce his crops, he is shamed. If seers cannot produce prophecies, they are shamed. A thief is shamed when he is caught. That doesn't mean he is ashamed. He may or may not be. He is ashamed because he's defeated in the one thing he's supposed to be able to do, which is to thieve. He has failed, and that is the shame. The psalmists, as is well known... Oh, I've got these a bit out of order, sorry. I beg your pardon. No, I haven't. The psalmist, as is well known, extremely concerned for their honour, which is being negated by being put to shame, their great horror. For example, probably if you give me a moment, I'll see if I can go back and... Yes. Man of honour. Right, is that difficult, is it? Right. I'm sorry, we worked on this so hard at the beginning to get it right. The psalmists are extremely concerned for their honour, which is negated by being put to shame, their great horror. They're constantly saying things, "Oh my God, in you I trust. Do not let me be put to shame. Do not let my enemies exult over me," which is exactly the situation of losing your honour. When it is Yahweh's honour, the word kavod is usually translated glory. Of humans, of men, it's always translated honour. But it's exactly the same word as human honour, attributed to the male deity by other males. And so I reckon that we should always translate kavod, glory, by honour. Sitting on his throne, Yahweh is surrounded by his courtiers who cry out, "The whole earth is full of his honour." All Israel was created for the sake of his honour. It just won't let us alone, will it? Everything Yahweh does is for the sake of his honour. He says, "For my sake and for my sake only I act. Why should my name, reputation, be slighted? I will not give my honour to another." Honour is something, if you've got, you have to be very jealous about, because there are loads of other people out there just itching to get their hands on your honour. If you lose their honour, they gain honour. A beautiful temple will bring the deity honour. "Go up to the hills," says the prophet Haggai, "and bring wood and build the temple, that I, God, may take pleasure in it and acquire honour." And when he's having a contest with the Egyptian king, he says, "I will harden Pharaoh's heart and I will get honour at the expense of Pharaoh and all his armies." Whenever it appears, the honour of God is the honour of a male, for that is the only kind of honour there is. Every time we encounter his honour, we must remind ourselves that we are moving in the male sphere, not in some glorified stratospheric concept of shining things in the sky. Holiness. Holiness is also a gendered term in the Bible. It's a strange but symbolically meaningful fact that the adjective for holy, kadosh, in Hebrew, never occurs in the feminine in the Hebrew Bible. Women cannot be holy, sanctified, or consecrated. In the New Testament, the situation is much the same. Only twice is holy used of a woman, and then in rather special cases. Which means that the sphere of holiness, on the whole, is exclusively male, which is perhaps what we would have expected anyway, since holiness is the essence of the male deity. Yahweh, being divine, is holy, and so is everything that is closely related to him, everything that is in his sphere. So when we encounter Isaiah's term, the Holy One of Israel, we should always recall that it's properly the holy male of Israel, or perhaps the holy Israelite male. As the Holy One, Yahweh is ancient and eternal and high, all masculine terms, as we've seen. Thus says the high and lofty one, whose name is holy, I dwell in the high and lofty place. Or I am Yahweh, your Holy One, the Creator of Israel, your King. He's Creator, who created in a male mode. You know what the male mode of creation is? By word, as against the female mode of creation, which is by birth. So every time you praise God as Creator, you're thanking him for being truly male. He is incomparable. To whom then will you compare me? Who is my equal, says the Holy One. That sets him apart. What belongs most to the supreme male are some other holy males. To the priests, Yahweh says, you shall be holy to me, for I am holy, and I have separated you from the peoples that you should be mine. So being holy, being male, being separated, and belonging to the deity, all part of the one coherent network. The priests are all male, of course, unlike in most religions, and the nation is holy because it is his. It's not that every member of it is holy in some ethical or spiritual sense. So what things are holy? Well, God himself, his name, his temple, its objects, his priests, his Sabbaths, all these things are separated from ordinary life and attached to the divine sphere. In short, holiness is an exclusionary term. Nothing is holy if it is female, nothing if it is domestic, nothing if it is in the realm of the moral. If it is outside the sphere of the male, God himself, and the objects and practices of his cult. Womanlessness. On this point, I will bring before you 4 possible role models: David, Jesus, Paul, and Yahweh. It may seem strange to speak of David, a man with 8 principal wives and at least 10 others of secondary rank, as womanless. But it's a striking feature of the David story that the males are so casual about women, and that women are so marginal to the lives of the protagonists. In this whole story, on the whole, there is no sexual desire, no love stories, no romances, no wooing, no daring deeds for the sake of a beloved. This is not a world in which men long for women. It's rather a matter of pride for David and his men, in fact, that they have kept themselves from women. Women have always been kept from us whenever I go on an expedition. The vessels, whatever they are, of the young men are holy, even when it is a common journey, that is a non-holy journey, he avers. Holiness, we now know, means whatever else it means, not contaminated by women. Here is the image of masculinity that the David story promotes. it says loud and clear, if ever only implicitly, that a real man can get along fine without women. He can have several women in a casual kind of way, but he has nothing to gain from them except children, and he owes them nothing. A man does well to steer clear of women. A man does not need women. A man is not constituted by his relationship with women. Jesus is another classical, womanless, biblical male. It's not that Jesus treats women badly. It's just that he doesn't need them. There are men, who are often referred to as men's men, even of our own day, who've been brought up in a male world and much prefer the company of men to women, who can nevertheless be very charming and gallant to women, can even, better than that, recognise their rights and go so far as to proclaim themselves feminists in their own small way. Do you know any I know talking about? And yet they have no place for women in their life and get along fine without women. Jesus is such a womanless man, and he shows it first and foremost by not being married. No matter his reasons, it's actually a very ostentatious way of signalling women who needs them. He is not a woman hater, and he actually loves Martha and her sister, though he's a bit severe with his mother. He can be kind, perhaps even affectionate to ill women, and on principle, it seems, to socially unacceptable women. He's touched by a woman who adores him, and he obviously inspires loyalty in the many women who go so far as to follow him from Galilee to Jerusalem. But he has no wife, no female friend. He doesn't live in a family with mother and sisters and aunts and female cousins. He's an itinerant preacher, and his male disciples have taken their place. They are his family. He is a self-sufficient male. And so too is Paul. In his vision of the ideal community, there is neither male nor female, neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female. This is not such good news for women as is often thought, for a doctrine of the equality of women can be a way of not recognizing them as women, just as we're more than a little suspicious if someone says, I don't notice if a person is black. In Paul's construction of masculinity, a man is better off womanless. Marriage to a woman is a fetter in which a man is bound. Are you bound to a wife? Don't seek to be free. Being unmarried is looseness or freedom. He thinks it would be better if every man were like him on this score. That is womanless. I wish that all were as I myself am. His advice to men is, are you free from a wife? Do not seek a wife. And those who are already with a woman would be better off living a womanless existence. Let those who have wives live as though they had none. That's the slogan of a real man, of the most unreconstructed kind, I mean. Of course, while using women, live as if they did not exist. What then of Yahweh? Alone of all ancient male gods, Yahweh has no consort. Whatever the reasons for male monotheism and whatever its benefits, one of its certain effects is to denigrate women. To men, the figure of Yahweh implies that the female is unnecessary. To women, it implies that they are excluded from the sphere of power and the holy, and thus of significance. I will admit that doing without women, or even ignoring them, is far less reprehensible than many other biblically attested attitudes to women. Women in the Bible can be despised, or feared, or threatened, or blamed, or abused, or trivialized, or stereotyped, or marginalized, or humiliated. And I can quote chapter and verse from Isaiah, that paragon of the prophets, for every one of those attitudes. If I were to catalogue biblical misogyny, I could not fail to mention the climactic vision in Revelation of the whole company of the redeemed in heaven, who are represented as 144,000 male virgins who, quotes, have not defiled themselves with women, which certainly gives women an idea of how they are esteemed in the eyes of heaven. Totality thinking. For the final two elements of masculinity, I feel on less secure ground than I was before. I can't connect totality thinking and binary thinking so unequivocally with masculinity, but I still think that there's a substantial connection. It's mainly that the examples occur so typically in the context of other male language. So I'll offer these points for your consideration, but with a shade less confidence than I had in the previous part of the paper. Totality thinking refers to thinking outside the box of one's own time and place, to taking into one's view all of time, all of space. Women in ancient times lived their lives in the context of the home. If they left it to go shopping, they nevertheless didn't travel distances, they didn't concern themselves with foreigners or with distant lands. Their focus was family and neighbours in the here and now. Men, on the other hand, even in the ancient world, were not infrequently made aware of places beyond their immediate ken and were encouraged to envisage times beyond their own. It's to men, therefore, I believe, that we owe temporal phrases and terms like forever, everlasting, eternal. 283 occurrences of forever in the Bible, 61 of everlasting, 68 of eternal in the New Testament. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel. Good enough, but from everlasting to everlasting has to be said. We, your people, the flock of your part, will give thanks to you forever from generation to generation. You, O Yahweh, are on high forever. And even when men keep saying forever for the sake of emphasis, even when forever doesn't make much sense. Look at this one. I will keep your law continually forever and ever. Does the psalmist expect to be around forever and ever? No, he just knows as a man that his scope, if he is to say something worth saying about the deity, he must be comprehensive and must embrace the totality of time. In the spatial realm, phrases like the ends of the earth, all peoples, all nations represent the same impulse to encompass and comprehend the totality. Can it be insignificant that the most common word in the Hebrew Bible is all? Kol, all. It's 12th most common in English. Hear this, all you people, give ear, all inhabitants of the earth. You shall be my treasured possession. Out of all the peoples, the whole earth is mine. May the Israelite king have dominion from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. Totality thinking is a means of exercising dominion, of asserting one's will. It is a token of strength. Must it not be a male characteristic? Binary thinking. I'll stay with the Psalms for my first examples of binary thinking. In one of its simplest forms, it's the division of humanity into two groups, us and them. In the Psalms, the us is usually the lone psalmist, and the them are enemies who constantly surround and threaten the psalmist. In 2/3 of the Psalms, this binary conflict is the fundamental situation. Rise up, O Yahweh, you strike all my enemies on the cheek, you break the teeth of the wicked. I pursued my enemies and overtook them. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Why not just be led by the shepherd? No, we have to have enemies, even in Psalm 23. Who is it, I ask, who represents reality as being, on the whole, conflict? Is it men or is it women? Given that a fundamental construction of masculinity in ancient Israel is that of the male as warrior, is it not likely to be men? Even when psalmists are writing poetry and not actually fighting, they imagine life as a battlefield and themselves as harassed by armed enemies. Women can have enemies too, I dare say, but do their enemies pursue them and seek their life? And do the women spend a lot of time envisaging the destruction and death of their opponents? What of Jesus? Is he a male binary thinker? I collected these examples just from the early chapters of Matthew. Not to abolish, but fulfill. Let what you say be yes or no. Those who are well need no doc, but those who are sick. He who finds his life will lose it. binary thinking. Very interesting. You could go on collecting. Now, these oppositions are not always the whole story. You can't always answer yes or no to a question, and they betray, to my mind, the conflict-ridden mindset of the traditional male. Now, Jesus is, to be sure, not entirely a victim of binary thinking, because it's also characteristic of him to confuse traditional categories and oppositions, sometimes amounting to a deconstruction of them. Here's some cases from those same chapters of Matthew, where the opposition is turned on its head. Love your enemies, not hate your enemies. Leave the dead to bury their dead. Well, how can the dead bury their dead? He's playing with and he's subverting some traditional language. My yoke is easy and my burden light. They're the two things that a yoke and a burden you don't expect to be, and so on. All the same, I think it's true to say that Jesus thinks largely in binary categories. That's part of the force of his rhetoric, and one of the reasons why he's so sure of himself. I come to an evaluation, finally, of biblical male values. Being a man is not bad, not necessarily. Half the world's population are men, and they're not all bad, are they? Even being a traditional man, subscribing to male ideology and following football need not be bad. Being strong can be quite useful when it comes to lifting heavy weights or unscrewing jam jars. But putting strength into action in the form of violence and is almost always bad, and using strength for killing is always bad in my book. Being tall is not a bad thing, but looking down on other people is. Making tallness, which is an accident of nature and can't even be strived for, a value that is to be esteemed as foolish. A quest for honour, a bit different. Although it's quintessentially male, it's not necessarily a bad thing. If honour is something granted by the group, a person achieves honour only by embodying the ideals of the group. And if those ideals include integrity, altruism and wisdom, we would only disparage the quest for honour if we dissented from those ideals. The concept of holiness as what belongs to the deity is not intrinsically bad, though if the world is the Lord's, it's hard to see what shouldn't count as holy. The biblical male use of holiness as an exclusionary device has got to be resisted, though. Womanlessness among men is not only unfortunate for them, but is always to the detriment of women. Totality thinking is generally wishful thinking and should be done only in moderation. Binary thinking may well be inevitable, but in binary pairs there's always one privileged term, and in the most fundamental binary of all, male-female, women always lose out. Binaries need to be constantly challenged. I conclude with a demonstration of how widespread male language is in the Bible. I choose a text that is put in the mouth of a woman. It is Mary's Magnificat. My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Saviour. The poem is esteemed on all sides, but from the perspective of a gender analysis, it is a shocking text for the way a female character is made the mouthpiece of so much masculine ideology. Hardly a word of the Magnificat fails to reflect male language, and it is ripe for an exposure of ideological bias. God's most important characteristic is strength. He is the mighty one. Let's put in red strong words for God's strength. His mercy, which this poem praises, it must not be misunderstood as a soft or quasi-feminine counterpart of strength. It corresponds to the Hebrew chesed, which does not mean mercy or loving kindness in our language, and it is not an emotion. Chesed is covenanted or promised support, which is not the same as sheer strength because it has an interpersonal dimension. It's normally the action of a superior towards an inferior. Almost everywhere it is males who exercise it, and possession of it implies strength. Likewise, the deity's role as saviour, while it's very welcome to humans, is an aspect of his strength and power, male qualities. Let's colour in saviour and mercy. Holiness, as we've seen, is another male characteristic. So we need to do that. Mary describes herself as lowly, which can't refer to the social disapproval that attends a married woman who's had no child, but the low status she has in being a woman, who expects to be overlooked and disregarded, but in this case has been looked upon by a powerful male. She will be called blessed, she says, realizing that her own worth will arise from no quality of her own, from no desire or effort that she has had or expended, but from an event not of her making. She will be praised by future generations, masculine language, solely because she's become, without her own volition, a mother. She's a victim who's accepted her divinely imposed lot, but is nevertheless a victim. And binary thinking. Totality thinking, we have here all generations, forever and ever, holy, and so on. And binary thinking is well represented by the fantastical idea of putting down the mighty from their thrones and exalting those of low degree, as bizarre as solving world hunger by creating a new class of the hungry who were previously bankers. Here is the Magnificat with the male language in red. My soul is Mary, she speaks for herself. My spirit rejoices, she speaks for herself. Behold, she's calling to others. The imagination of their hearts, I can't make that specifically, mate. Everything else, I'm alleging is. The twofold scandal of a male Bible is encapsulated here. It is in the first place that the Bible, widely taken as an authoritative word of God, or at least a revered or beloved or respected testament to universal religious values, is deeply compromised by its ubiquitous adherence to specifically male values, which everywhere distort the apparent universality of its contents. Being a male text, the Bible inevitably enshrines and perpetuates male power, which makes it a problematic text for anyone in the modern world who has some sense of the social injustice of gender inequality. And secondly, the second scandal of a male Bible is that the Bible's masculinity is for the most part invisible, hardly ever noticed or mentioned, even in our world that is much more egalitarian than that of the Bible. Even if we don't quite know what we should do about the scandal, we do at least know something of its shape and size. Thank you.